forefront where it rightfully belongs. It didn't start in Seattle, or Los Angeles, or Jacksonville, or Miami. It started right here in Pittsburgh School District by a group of individuals that, by society standards, myself included, were the least likely to succeed. And oftentimes when I think about that statement, I think the society made one mistake. They didn't tell us. So we were living in the moment, helping an underserved, neglected community, and in doing so, create the foundation of every EMS system in this country. That wasn't our intent at all. We were there to serve the community. And, you know, we had challenges and hurdles and barriers to overcome. Believe it or not, we had to teach the community itself that whenever a Freedom House vehicle came to your home, I expect that individual to come in with an oxygen tank, with a heart monitor, to take a blood pressure and give them medications, or start an IV on them, and things like that. The community wasn't accustomed. There were times when we would be treating a patient in someone's home. Their concern was, why are you still here with my loved one? Why don't you just transport them to the emergency room? If something happens to you, happen to them, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So we were tasked with teaching the community that we would bring the emergency room to them. In addition to that, we also had to teach the emergency rooms themselves. Because they were, believe it or not accustomed to someone that looked like me with a white uniform on, with an afro and a beard at that time, coming in and telling the emergency room staff, we have a 29-year-old male that suffered a 6th episode while at work. His blood pressure is 120/80. His heart monitor is a tachycardia rhythm. His lung sounds are clear. I started an IV of lactated ringers on him. He has past medical history of heart failures and no medication. They weren't used to that. So we got laughed at and mocked. And so we had constant challenges on a day-to-day basis, so many that we got accustomed to. And it's interesting that they use the example of a child that was struck by a bus at Squirrel Hill. It's ironic because we were only allowed to provide service to the residents of the Hill District during that time. And we discovered that the police were not giving us the calls that we should have been getting. So we had to come up with a way to offset that. So we bought a police scanner. And we started monitoring police radio. And whenever a call came in the Hill, we would self-dispatch. And oftentimes beat the police there, treat the patient, and pass the police on the way to the hospital. True story. And that story there reminds me because we became victims of our own success. And that's how we were discovered with the child struck by a bus. We monitored that call on the police radio, and when we heard it in the self-dispatch, and treated the child, the community saw it. And that's why they went back to the mayor or the political powers at that particular time and voiced their concerns. And that was really the turning point in the whole creation of freedom of assembly, because we dealt with the racism during that time, and we got accustomed to it. But political environment, we were not able to compete in that, and that's what forced us to shut down operations in October 1975. Believe it or not, we had a written agreement with the city of Pittsburgh that they would take all the Freedom House's people and the vehicles and equipment during that time. And if you ever go to Heinz Hall, Heinz History Museum. That actual agreement is down there on display. And the city of Pittsburgh reneged on that agreement and really went on a systematic elimination process. And I was one of the few that came over to Fremont, roughly about 5 of us out of 35 that came over. I remained. And I was no different than all of the other ones. The goal was to get rid of everybody. And as I'm standing here talking to you all, I can sense that very few of you have ever heard of freedom. And even though that saddens me, I understand the reasons why. Because it was unfortunately the city of Pittsburgh Emergency Medical Services' goal at that time is to eliminate any mention, any historical perspective of freedom. And if you eliminate the history makers, you simply eliminate that part of history that they made. So I use that as a motivating factor to kind of make sure that this part of history that's been dormant is brought back into the forefront. So I've been traveling around the country, telling different EMS systems around the country about the history of EMS and the foundation of where it rests and some of the trials and tribulations that we had to endure during the time frame. And as you saw some of them in the documentary, I'd like to point out one of my personal trials was I wasn't allowed to do anything. First person in the country to do a tracheal intubation in the field. And I had all of this training and was trained by visionaries and things like that. I was relegated to the role of an observer. I couldn't drive the truck, couldn't examine patients, couldn't talk on the radio. I was just sick. Until one day we went into the person's home, and the person was unconscious, not breathing, the heart rate beating, and the crew that I was working with didn't know what to do. So they panicked and looked at the person that wasn't allowed to do anything and said, "You take over." So I assigned duties and responsibilities to the remaining 2 crew members that were subsequent to save the person's life. That's great, but it had to be kept quiet because I wasn't allowed to do it. So that put the responsibility on me to remain this quiet, reserved, unnoticeable person, and do I step up my game? And I chose to do the latter. I chose to make sure that the city of Pittsburgh EMS knew exactly who John Moon was. And I did that by challenging the treatment of patients. Unfortunately, during that time, the paramedics for the city of Pittsburgh were trained that in public housing complexes and underserved communities throughout the Hill, you were not going to get a heart attack, a stroke, or diabetes, or anything like that. You were only going to get a shooting, a drug overdose, or domestic violence. Those are the only calls that you get in those communities. So before Pittsburgh EMS went into a public housing complex, it would wait on the edge and wait for the police to escort them in because we're in this dangerous community. Unfortunately, Pittsburgh EMS, when it first began, was a 98% white organization. They were brought in from the suburbs into an urban environment. So they came with them preconceived ideas on what it would be like coming into an urban environment. So they brought with them knives and guns to protect themselves. The trucks at that time had handcuffs on them. They had 7-cell flashlights, which were about this long, not to find your way around in the dark, but to use as a weapon, because I have to have something to protect myself. Personnel were dressed up like police officers during that time frame, so that authoritarian mentality was there. It wasn't unusual for Pittsburgh EMS to pull over a car that went through a stop sign or a red light, and the paramedics yelled at them for doing it. They couldn't arrest them, they didn't have any ticket writing powers at that time, but it's just that mindset that they did. So, fortunately for me, as I started challenging the department on its treatment and the training, and I was able to get that flashlight and the handcuffs came up to me. They knew who John Moon was. I started going after the Yes,
One could argue that, that the origin of Freedom House was not only need, but also racism. What role does racism play in emergency medicine today?
it plays a very big role, both in emergency medicine as well as pre-hospital care. I'm part of which used to be, a task force of diversity, equity, inclusion, which is changed. The name has been changed for obvious reasons. And their goal is to increase the numbers in emergency medicine for physicians. So I'm part of a task force that has about 3 or 4 different African American physicians that are emergency physicians out of UPMC as part of this task force. Also, when I worked for the city of Pittsburgh, I got noticed, I got promoted, and what I noticed at that time is the city of Pittsburgh EMS wasn't hiring anyone that looked like me. The department went 10 years without hiring an African American. So I challenged the department on this hiring process. And it's your problem, you find a way to solve it. So I designed the very first diversity recruitment program for Pittsburgh EMS. And I used the same format at Freedom House. I went out into the community and I recruited people that had no idea what an EMT was or a paramedic. Never talked to one and placed them into a training program. Was able to get the city to give them a salary while they were going through their training, and once they completed the training, they were guaranteed employment because the department had invested into this individual. And it was very successful, but not without a lot of resistance from the department, from the personnel, and fighting the paramedics union and stuff like that. But that became the norm that the department used all while I was there. And there was always a racially balanced group of employees that were going through their training. And it worked fine until the troublemaker left. And I'm doing all of these things and things like that. What I didn't know at the time is I was sabotaging my own career. And the department had what I would call a next man up promotion process. If you're at this level and a position becomes available above you, you automatically get it because you have all this experience and skills and things. And they used that process for 30 years until it was time for John Moon to be promoted to the assistant chief position. I got passed over by a white male that I'd been his boss for 15 years. And I had to report to him, in addition, all of my duties and responsibilities, because I handled day-to-day operations for roughly about 15 years. Everything went through me: promotions, hirings, terminations, complaints, everything. I had to teach him all of those responsibilities, which made him eligible for the next promotion. And subsequently, that did happen. And so I challenged the department on that. And you don't file a complaint against your employee and expect to live a happy life. So they made my life a living hell. All of my duties and responsibilities were taken away. I was relegated to role teaching CPR and family complaints. And you know, besides being ostracized, I had to make a decision. Do I stay here and show you how tough I am? Or do I cut my losses and move on? And I chose to do that. So I retired in 2009 after 34 years with the city of Pittsburgh. And I had to accept the fact that no matter what I did, how good I was, what I created and designed, I was never going to eventually be promoted to run the department because it was designed to prevent that. Second thing I had to come to grips with was that wasn't why I was there. I wasn't there to rise up and one day run the department.